Jim will know more, washed it, rewrote it. I don't know what happened. All I know is I'm on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars. And the insurance company is saying, well, you got it, so it's up to you. And I'm saying, but I didn't cash it. I don't know the person that did cash it. It's not my check. It's not my bank. Who do I call? So I'm at a loss because I can't call the bank that cashed it because they would say, who are you? So it's just
What a
been,
nightmare. What a nightmare. And the stress of knowing you're on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars when you didn't do anything wrong. So here comes our expert, Jim Hitchcock, to help out. Jim, welcome to the show. My goodness. Welcome, everyone, to the Smarter Online Safety Podcast. I am your host, Jocelyn King, and I am so excited to bring you today's guests. We have two guests today because we're going to be talking about check washing and check fraud. So joining us, our first guest is Jim Hitchcock. He is the Vice President for Fraud Mitigation at the American Bankers Association, and he serves as the association's primary expert on fraud mitigation activities and programs. He identifies and tracks the key fraud topics and trends he sees across the entire banking community. He runs banker committees focused on fraud. He identifies potential commercial and government partners to help develop fraud mitigation capabilities, and he develops the fraud prevention programs and finds opportunities to help partners that provide products and services to banks. Now, prior to joining ABA in 2021, Jim was director in the Capital One Anti-Money Laundering Department, serving in a fraud advisory role. He also began his banking journey during February 2016 after finishing a career in federal law enforcement with the Department of Defense Inspector General for Investigations and as U.S. Secret Service. Jim's role within the U.S. Department of Defense included investigation and prosecutions related to international bribery, money laundering schemes, and export violations related to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. During his tenure with the U.S. Secret Service, Jim served as a subject matter expert investigating identity and computer-related crimes. And beyond investigation, Jim has worked in policy management. He's led teams of investigators, as well as developed and implemented investigative best practices and policy consistent with U.S. Attorney General guidelines and regulatory law. All of this to say, he knows a thing or two about all of this fraud, and he's going to shed some light, give us some top tips, and explain what's going on that you and I need to know so we can protect ourselves. So also joining us is Patty Aubrey. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and business strategist with over 30 years of experience in publishing, in personal development, and in brand building. She was the president of Chicken Soup for the Soul. So you know that entire enterprise that grew into a billion-dollar brand and has over 600 million books sold. She oversaw the building of that organization with the entire team and Jack Canfield, and she's overseen the publication of more than 230 New York Times bestsellers, as well as being an 8-time New York Times bestselling author herself. As the CEO of the Canfield Training Group, Patty has worked with thousands of authors, speakers, and entrepreneurs, helping them turn their expertise into successful businesses. She is super passionate about helping people take ownership of their success, whether through storytelling, building personal brands, or navigating challenges. And Patty has been influential in my life of helping to bring this podcast to all of you. And she is here today because she has had unfortunate personal experience with some check fraud that is personally putting her and her husband on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars, caught in the crosshairs between insurance companies and depositing banks and crediting banks. And so we are partnering with Jim Hitchcock here to help solve Patty's problem, educate all of us at the same time. So welcome, Jim and Patty. And Patty, do you want to say a little more about what your situation was so that most people think check washing, they might know what it is, and Jim will give us all the specifics, but what happened in your case to you?
Sure. And thanks for having me, Jocelyn, and nice to meet you, Jim. So basically, I was redoing a roof and the insurance company was paying for it. And so they sent me a check. It was a two-party endorsement. And so I signed the check and then sent it to the roofing company, which lo and behold, uh, they never received it. And so only to find out they were calling me saying, "Where's the check?" And I'm saying, "I signed it, I endorsed it, I sent it to you." And I'm showing that it's been cashed from in my portal and you should have it. And they're like, "We don't have it." And so we went on this massive hunt of looking for where did it go, what happened. It turned out that somebody must have taken it somewhere along the line between California and Nashville. And Jim will know more, washed it, rewrote it. I don't know what happened. All I know is I'm on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars. And the insurance company is saying, "Well, you got it, so it's up to you." And I'm saying, "But I didn't cash it. I don't know the person that did cash it. It's not my check. It's not my bank. Who do I call?" So I'm at a loss because I can't call the bank that cashed it because they would say, "Who are you?" So it's just
What a
been
nightmare. What a nightmare. And the stress of knowing you're on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars when you didn't do anything wrong. So here comes our expert, Jim Hitchcock, to help out. Jim, welcome to the show. My goodness.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and thanks to both of you for pulling me into this unfortunate situation for you, Patty. But you know, unfortunately for America, this happens a lot. Okay, this is one of the oldest crimes in America. Actually, checks have been around longer than U.S. currency, believe it or not. So so it's been going on for a while, but there's been ebbs and flows, right? And we've had a rash of fraud in banks and the financial industry going back about 3 years now. The criminals have figured out that there's real money involved here, quick money involved here. They figured out how to defeat different defenses that banks have and different regulatory laws that are in place they might leverage that are designed to benefit and protect consumers. The bad guys have figured out how to use them to their advantage to get access to the money quickly before somebody like you could reach out to the financial institution and say, "Hey, that check's missing. Don't negotiate that check." In this case, it sounds like it was too late. Now, some interesting statistics here that both the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, they're the investigative law enforcement arm for the U.S. Postal Service. They teamed up with the Treasury Department. There's a group in the Treasury Department that we refer to as FinCEN. That's the Financial Crime Enforcement Network. And their role in this is to collect intelligence for criminal activity similar to this. Banks are basically required to report on suspicious financial activity per the Bank Secrecy Act in the United States. So Postal Service and FinCEN teamed up to try to, figure out what's going on here out in America with mail theft and how it relates to check fraud. So they created a special code for banks to insert into their reporting to better monitor this. This occurred about a year and a half ago. So the statistics finally came back about September of 2024, but I'm going to read them here for you for a second. So FinCEN received 15,417 BSA reports, Bank Secrecy Act reports, from 841 financial institutions in America. Now, more than $688 million in suspicious activity reported. Not all that is a loss. Banks probably stopped some of it,
Mhm.
but what we've discovered is a lot of it is at loss here in America. And these stats kind of play into what you're dealing with, Patty, because if you dig deeper into those numbers, FinCEN said 44% of these reports indicated the check was altered after being stolen. 26% said it was used as a template for a counterfeit, or what we refer to now as cooked. It's an alteration of what you've heard about washing checks. Washing checks are when the criminals steal the check, use like an acetone, change the payee name, might change the amount. In this case, the amount wasn't changed because it was a commercial check and it was a high dollar. So it would just change the payee name, for example, and then have somebody walk it into a branch. Well, 20% of checks out of this population were just fraudulently signed. When I worked these cases back in the early 2000s, late 90s, that 20% were the 20% we caught red-handed. And they were the people down in their luck, just trying to steal a check, sign it over to them, and run with the money. But it gets a little more complicated with the counterfeit check scenario. So I can pause there and see if Patty wanted to add anything further to her experience here. Like, what do you like? How is it working with the insurance company and the banks and trying to get additional information?
Right. So I didn't call the bank because the bank is the insurance company's bank. So it wasn't like it went through my account and then I wrote a check. This is a check that came from the bank of the insurance company to me to sign. But when I finally got a copy of it, it looked so real, but it had a different person's name on it. It
Right.
had it had a California address, but it was obviously cashed in a southeastern bank somewhere because the bank was only in the southeast. And so here I was like trying to find the bank in California, only to find out there is no bank by that name in California. So then I'm thinking, well, did they get it in Nashville? What happened? I called the roofing company. They've been really great working with me on this. And I feel so horrible because, the guy that sold it to me has done a really good job. He's been so like hospitable about it. But I'm not getting any answers other than, sorry, it's the ball's in your court. And my own insurance company is saying like, there's nothing we can do. It's out of our hands. So it's frustrating and it's looming. And every month that goes by, I'm still thinking about it. I'm going to sleep thinking about it, waking up thinking about it. So it's hard because I just don't know where to go, Jim.
And Jim,
Yeah.
also, Patty can't get certain types of information because of Bank Privacy Act. So, like finding out about the bank that cashed it, and the bank, she's only going to get limited information. And Patty, in this case, you were able to get copies of the check, at least, which you gave to Jim, which is helpful, so he can help you solve this out. But Jim, people are kind of stuck when they can't even interact with the banks, right?
Yeah, and it's a tough situation for everybody, right? Over the years, people like to blame somebody for this problem. Is it the Postal Service's problem? Maybe, maybe not. Is it law enforcement's problem because they're not arresting enough people? They're dealing with a lot of obstacles here too. Is it the bank's problem because we should be detecting these bad checks in the front end? Well, to be honest, looking at the checks Patty gave me, that she had provided a legitimately negotiated check from the insurance company and then the fraudulently um, deposited check. And on the surface, it would pass all the forensic tests coming into the bank. Like the bank has electronic monitoring set up to detect an altered check, for an example.
For instance, if they use the solvents and things, or
Yeah, it's solvents to detect it and check the security features on it, etc. The criminals have gotten so good at reproducing these that they look authentic. Now looking at those two checks, though, I noticed a few things. Number one, I believe it was, quote, like cooked. It's a form of washing a check today using computer equipment and software and fresh check stock. So the criminal takes Patty's check, scans it, and then changes just the payee name to his or her compromised ID or account they're using to deposit this check. And then they reprint it on different like check stock. So the security features aren't necessarily there.
so that would mean that like
Same.
the routing and everything is even in the same font and same
Yeah.
size. It's kind of
Yes.
like when you take a photo and remove a background, you still have
Yeah.
legitimate things there, but you can put somebody in a completely different location than they really were, as an example.
Yeah, no, very good point. Because in this case, like the routing number, account number, dollar amount, written dollar amount, purpose for the insurance reimbursement. I think they had fire on there. The check number, everything was was accurate. The only thing that changed was the payee. Now, there's a lot of barriers for a bank to deal with here too, right? Because everything's driven off that routing number, account number. And when a bank receives a check, they're held by different regulations that protect consumers for availability of funds. Let's say this Patty really did cash this check and really needed to reimburse her contractor within 3 to 5 days without paying an additional service fee. Well, the bank is required to make funds available through a certain period of time for those reasons. So the fraudsters know this. They know they just float it for a period of time. In this case, what I'm guessing happened is the fraudster had an account pre-opened. Once they stole the check, they opened an account. They probably opened it up online and manipulated this check and probably submitted the check via remote deposit capture. Like, at least looking at the rear, there was no like stamp that would indicate it was at the branch. It didn't look like it was taken through an ATM machine. But remember, remote deposit capture could occur in Nashville with this specific bank, or the bad guy could do it from California if that's where the check was intercepted, which it seems more likely it was, because the fraudster's address used was a California address. That doesn't mean like they're truly in California, but remember, fraudsters aren't always the most clever at the end of the day, right? In the front end, in the theft department, they are in a sense, but they figured out how to leverage different laws and so forth in place. So that's the challenge for the bank, right? The remote deposit capture. Is it deposited in an ATM? Is it deposited at the branch? And there's different regulatory laws in place that banks have to consider while they're running this through their fraud detection processes that are designed to protect the consumer. And sometimes that works against the banks. Now in a remote deposit, for example, just to be clear, a remote deposit situation, a bank does have a lot more flexibility in the availability of the funds, but other regulatory protections might kick in that protect the consumer from the money moving around, like who's at risk. We talked about that, the liability of it, right?
Right. Now, a question a layperson would have here is that it was not made out. The original check was made out to Patty and to the roofing company, and it had to be endorsed by both. Now the check that cleared was made out to somebody completely different. So
Yes.
whether it was washed or, like in this case, since you looked at, and by the way, since you looked at the back of this when you saw it was not endorsed, so therefore the check that was deposited was not a washed version of the check Patty had, because it did not have the endorsement on the back. So it was counterfeited from there as a template. So things can go either check washing or check counterfeiting. Either can happen from an intercepted check. But let's face it, the ideal thing would be to have these things wired. But how come the banks, a question all of us lay people had, how come the banks didn't notice that it was made out to somebody it shouldn't have been made out to?
Well, there's a whole in-clearing process, right? Like this fraudster knew enough not to open up an account at the same bank that the check is created from, right? We call that the drawing bank. So the insurance company uses a bank, tells that bank, hey, send this check to Patty. But the fraudster took this, used a different bank, deposited it, and now that bank A, where bank first deposit, we call it, needs to send it to bank B. And then bank B has, we call it the midnight deadline. It's like a 24-hour period from the time bank B receives the check. They have that 24 hours to determine whether or not that's a negotiable instrument from the lens of a counterfeit, because bank B is the best situation to say, was this check really created by our customer? Now let's just say it's altered, like the bad guys I used to catch, right? Sloppy alterations. Then the bank of first deposit takes on the responsibility to determine whether or not that's a negotiable instrument. So let's say they deposited it. Let's just say it was washed the old way. They send it to bank B, to withdrawing bank. Withdrawing bank would send it back and say, no, you guys take the loss on this because we didn't write it. Now, this is a kind of a unique situation here, because a lot of the rules I'm talking about are consumer based, because Patty's the consumer, and it looked like this was a consumer account that the fraudster used. However, the case or the check did originate from a commercial account.
Mhm.
So a lot of times there's extra protections in commercial banking. It's called positive pay, and then payee positive pay. It's this electronic software that the bank holder can purchase if the bank offers it to monitor, to do what you were trying to, what you're asking. Hey, why didn't the drawing bank know that this check was no good? Like the
Supposed to be
insurance
made out to
company.
person A, and now it's
Yeah,
coming through same
yeah,
dollar amount, but now made out to person B, and
yeah,
that would have caught it.
yeah. But we, just to explain once again how, you know, sneaky the fraudsters are, they figured all this positive pay activity out with these commercial accounts like this. So what they figured out was, as long as you leave the whole check valid, like they did, account number, dollar amount, check number, that's what the old positive pay systems used to check. It didn't check the payee.
Right.
So it would go through. So if a commercial account doesn't have the latest and greatest payee positive pay software in place, it becomes a little more difficult for them to quickly identify that there's a counterfeit check here or an altered check here, and it's not going to the payee. So payee name seems to be the most critical point today in identifying whether or not a check is legitimate. We
So it,
talked about a lot there, but all this is what the banks have to deal with within
so it appears
seconds.
that then the check that Patty received, that she mailed, is technically lost in the mail and never deposited, because the one that was endorsed, that they endorsed to forward, was not deposited. It's a loss. Would that be fair?
Yeah, yeah. And what you describe is the big debate banks have to this day, right? Cooked is altered. No, it's not. It could be counterfeit. So what I like to true back to is, if the original disappears and this is the first check deposited, this cooked check, then it's counterfeit because they changed it and created new, right? Where if it's truly altered, then it's obvious, right? Like we were talking about earlier. But very good question. Very good question.
So Jim, my question is, I mean, the bank that issued it is probably one of the largest banks in the world.
Yep.
Wouldn't they have that software that would check the payee?
Yeah, and a lot of it is and that's something, just so everybody's aware, like ABA is not sitting idle in this, American Bankers Association. We're trying to work these problems out. We have a couple different working groups going on, drilling into these problems that you ask about. One with the big banks, another with the smaller banks, and we're trying to problem solve this. We're trying to get to the answer to why we don't have a system like positive pay in place for all commercial accounts, for example. And some of it comes down to costs, right? The way things are designed now, the the commercial account holder pays the cost of this software, and it's not cheap. It's not overly expensive. Now, some banks are requiring all commercial account holders to carry it, quote, like you would for insurance, right? Either it's in our service terms. If you don't carry this, then we're not liable for it. But and other banks are looking at, hey, how can we purchase this in an affordable fashion to give it to all our commercial account holders?
Mhm.
Now, what ABA is doing with all the banks, um, third-party technology companies, law enforcement, like the United States Postal Inspection Service, is we're pulling them all together actually next week, and we're trying to problem solve all together on how we can create a national solution to this, like more something that everybody is bought into, if you would, right?
And
So
even
that
then,
there's
unfortunately, there's
consistency.
yeah, and unfortunately, there's never a finish line, because as soon as you get that in place, the fraudsters, because this is their full-time job and there's so many of them, this is a business for them, and they spend all their time figuring out the loopholes and going through it,
Right.
just like every other type of crime. As soon as you close one door, another one, you're kind of having to play whack-a-mole, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now
That's a good
Patty
way to.
is better off from the fact that the check that was cashed was not endorsed, was not the one that they had endorsed, correct?
Yes, and like I said, we have a mix of consumer and commercial accounts here. Most
Mhm.
of the time, consumer accounts are made whole, if you would, or protected. Somebody like Patty is safe in this situation with the financial uh, industry group, whether it's the insurance company, the banks, etc. You probably aren't held liable here. Now, the issue with Patty is she has a relationship with this roofing company, and now the roofing company could like go after her for the money, but then you would turn around, Patty, and say to the bank, no, I never authorized that to be deposited. It's true counterfeit. I never signed that check that was negotiated, right?
In which case, only the criminals and the attorneys are going to make any money in this deal at this point,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah,
Well,
So,
you would think too that with the stats that you talked about in the beginning of this call or this
yeah,
podcast, that they would save so much money if they inserted this software.
yeah,
Um, you know,
yeah. And the software is, I mean, it is pretty regularly used, but there's delays and there's so many. Think about it. There's 5,000 licensed banks out there. There's probably another 5,000 credit unions. There's, I don't know how many insurance companies. These are all financial institutions that can negotiate in checks, right? Now, what's the likelihood of all 5,000 having that software, right? And using it. But like you said, this is coming, the commercial client is a big bank. So there was some kind of probably delay in the in clearing process, if you would. Like even I don't know the bottom line to this case, but I do know how the process should follow. Like I said, when that check got deposited, Bank A doesn't just hold on to it. They're kicking it to Bank B because it's a lot of money. Um, and Bank B then takes it in and routes it through their in-clearing processes, checks their client account, make sure they have those funding. It matches past history. Oh, yeah, they sent a check out. Like I looked at the dates on your check, for example, which was interesting. This one we're talking about, the cooked one, was actually made out, I think, prior
it
to the
was.
other check. So that was interesting. I mean, that could have been a red flag right there because now you have like the dates and the check because the check um what do you call it? Check item number was different too, right? And they should always run in sequential order. That's something we talked
it should at
about way
least be a
back in the early
flag,
2000s. Yeah.
right? At least be a
When I
flag.
went in back before a lot of this, like before the criminals actually worked on a global level in check fraud, like they do today, due to all the open social media, chat forums, and everything. Now it's like a global problem, but it's still regional, right? They still attack as a criminal element at a regional level. But back when it was truly regional, that's what we would go into the banks and tell them to look for this sequential order of the check number. Look
Right.
for this, look for that. But all that should be done systematically now. But you see, there's so many steps in the process, and we're trying to close different gaps. Because, you know, in 2004, there was this act passed called Check 21 that created, for a long story short, what that created was basically an image of a check carries the same weight as the check in and of itself.
Yeah.
We hated that at Secret Service. I remember we were pulling our hair out about it because we lost all our forensic evidence. I
Yeah.
used to love getting a paper check because sometimes I'd get what you call idents on them. That's a positive fingerprint in our database that links to somebody that was arrested before.
Right.
You
So it
know,
makes it harder for law enforcement. Yeah.
yeah, and we had handwriting exemplars and things like that. So now with the images, a lot of that's removed, right?
So,
So
so I'm sure a lot of our listeners' heads are exploding and they're going, OMG, what do I do? Now, one thing, some people might be thinking, oh, well, I don't write checks, so that's okay. But I do want to point out a couple things that we had talked about before. If you've ever had a check for your bank and it's out there somewhere and it was not shredded, which let's face it, how many out of all the checks you've given out, nobody could say that they know 100% have been shredded. That can be used, and somebody could be writing a draft on your account from a check that was written 3-5 years ago. Some of us have
Right.
accounts that go
Mhm.
back 15 years back when we were doing more checks, and all it takes is the routing number and the check and something plausible to come through. So all of us
Yeah.
are targets for this, and even if we haven't written a check for years. And then secondly, there's a lot of things, we were talking about this too. There are certain financial institutions that when you take a distribution, they're sending you a very large sum of money in a check in the mail. So, Jim, could you give some basic advice about that and then some specific advice to Patty? And then Patty, I know your eyes have been opened, in an unfortunate way through all this, but I'd love to know the lessons you learned as well, so we can really help our listeners learn how to, avoid this, protect it, and what to do if it happens. And for those of you who can't see us, who are just listening, Jim's background has this great little logo that says "Practice Safe Checks." So I just want to point that out.
There it is.
Mine says dummy.
Yeah. No, it doesn't,
No,
Patty. And I
no, it
tell you
doesn't.
what,
It happens to anybody.
yeah, I feel for you and other victims that are put in this scenario. I mean, you don't deserve to be a target, right? And the fraudsters are just like I said earlier, disrupting a lot of lives. So I've explained really what law enforcement is trying to do, what banks are trying to do. So at the end of the day, the consumers have to harden up and protect themselves too, right?
That's what we're all
So
about here. Thank you.
yeah. And I think my number one advice is if you don't need to write a check, don't try to do everything electronically. Like banks are pretty good at protecting the flow of money through the electronic systems, whether it's a peer-to-peer payment, which rides different rails, but it could be an e-check, ACH payment. Even wires
Bank
are better
wire,
protected.
bank wire. Yeah, for people.
Yeah. Now I say that, but no matter whether you're writing a check or paying electronically, make sure you know where the money is going
Mm.
and never send money to anybody that calls you and creates some sort of pressure situation that you don't know, that's portraying to be something they aren't, whether they claim they're from the bank or from Zelle or from whatever. Just hang up, don't trust them, and move on. Call a number that you already have for your bank and inquire. Okay. So a lot of times when a bank reaches out, they'll say, call us back, or just to confirm it's them, right? And look, trust is hard. We all want to trust, right? In society, we all think everybody has some good in them. It's a little easier for people like me not to trust, because for 25 years of my life, everybody lied to me, right? In law enforcement, ask any law enforcement person. But anyways, number one is, try to do electronic means. And then,
And then
yeah,
things like Zelle and stuff like that, though,
yeah, Zelle.
speak to
Yeah, there's a
people.
lot of different
Yeah,
options out there.
because there-
Inquire with your bank.
yeah. But
And
because
there's
there's a limit on Zelle, a lot of people can't use it as much as they'd like to, so they're kind of back to other means. So
other means, yeah. But you all banks offer online services and apps.
mhm.
I'm a big fan of apps. Apps seem to be harder than even online, because online you're introducing your laptop to more viruses, things like that. The apps are really, really secure.
I have a
Um,
question for you, because I was talking about this in one of my online safety trainings that I was doing with a group of people, and we were talking about the check washing. And one of the
yep,
questions they had was very interesting. They said, I don't personally have a checkbook and write it, but I do have automatic checks being written out of my account. So my bank creates the check and sends it. Does that
yeah.
also put me at risk? And I thought, oh, that's a great question for Jim.
Yeah, well, see, the bank would take a little more liability on because of different regulations in place
Because
once
they're the
you
ones that did.
initiate electronically.
Okay.
Yes. Now there's still, believe it or not, there's still quote fraud there too, right? That some people might label check fraud.
Okay.
Some people call it ACH or debit. But but there's still a risk of fraud. But yeah, that's an example of moving off of the paper checks onto an electronic means, right? Get the bank engaged. And you can do that via your online or mobile app with your bank. But if you have to write a check, once you send the check, monitor it on your online banking, right? And and today, monitoring isn't check your account every 30, 60 days. We got away with that in the 90s, not today. Now you have to check your account every day, a couple
Right.
times a day.
Okay, so
Check
that's a
that
big tip
check.
right there.
Yeah.
That's a good
Check.
thing. So signing up for the alerts that your bank would send to your phones, because
Yep.
if all of a sudden somebody had created a counterfeit check and was putting it through your bank, you would
Yeah.
see that coming through as activity.
Yeah, and think about that. What you're describing is a P2P service, whether it's Venmo, Zelle. I just threw Zelle out there. I didn't mean to use one or the other, but a lot of times you can set that dual authentication up where you get the alert,
But
right?
I even mean with your bank for your, like when you make a debit
Yeah.
payment at the
It, you,
gas station,
yeah,
what
and then in your bank on, yep.
tell you.
Yeah, exactly. But in your bank online, and you can, like, how do we do that for checks too, right? So yeah, absolutely. Set an alert, but monitoring is key. Okay. And then once again, if you have to write a check, use some kind of fraud resistant pen. Just keyword search it on Google. You can buy the pens pretty cheap. Keep it with your checkbook. Use that. At least it prevents like the old school washing.
So this will
Now,
prevent the check washing with solvents. It will not prevent the.
prevent the cooking. That's the bad guys just got around the defense, right?
But at
That's
least it
that's an
helps your
older
case.
defense.
Yeah. And in
Yeah,
Patty's case, and that's what she's.
Well, I think the other thing too for me, because it wasn't going to my bank. So I'm like, I'm just shepherding somebody else's money to somebody else. So if I had met you, last year, I would have written the check, I would have sent it FedEx, and I still would have called the next day and said, "Did you receive it?"
Mhm.
yeah.
So I just think they received it because I'm thinking, well, it's got to go to the roofing company, and from there they got to put it in their bank, and then it's got to go back to the other. So I'm just thinking life is good.
Well, and
Yeah.
you were monitoring, Patty, because you looked in your insurance
Well,
portal and
I
saw
only
that.
looked when the roofing guy came to me and said, "Your bank is being really awful, or your insurance company is being awful." And I said, "What are you talking about?" I mean, we're like months in after this job's been done. And so neither one of us, I mean, there's just no communication. And that's probably what they bank on because I don't, most people don't even have a relationship with a third party contractor or something like that.
But even
Yeah.
if you had looked in your portal, you would have seen that it cleared and just thought everything was okay, regardless of when you looked.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
showed great. You're like, okay, good, he got it and he cashed it.
Right. And the other bummer is that I don't have a copy of the original check, and nor does my insurance company. So I can't even see the original check that was supposedly made out to me. So it's like this crazy non-existence, but existence.
So is
You know,
that another tip? Should people be taking pictures of checks or somehow making a copy? Or what do you recommend for that, Jim?
Yeah, in certain scenarios like that, I would
A
absolutely
very large
take
check like
take
this.
take a photo. And maybe that's a defense we move towards in the future is if you opt to write a check, the bank requires you to take a picture of it, right? So that they know what it looks like in the state that it left your possession.
Mhm.
Because Patty, I mean, let me ask you, you mentioned you would mail FedEx, and how would that play out? You would take the check and you'd go to FedEx and hand it and put it in an envelope, pay for it, and walk away, right? So you have complete control of that.
right,
So
right.
in your scenario with the blue mailbox, it becomes out of everybody's possession, out of everybody's line of sight, so to speak, right? Arrival departure points are the most risky points in cybersecurity and even for Secret Service when they're protecting the president, right?
Yeah.
When you're truly in transit, you're pretty safe, but it's that arrival and departure. And there's many of those when you're moving a check. Like take the blue box that the fraudsters started physically
Just so everybody knows, we're
issuing.
talking about the big metal boxes in the US that
Yeah,
are the mail drop-offs outside of post offices.
yeah.
And they have a big slot where you can put something in. Do you want to talk about how fraudsters get stuff out of there too?
Yeah, yeah. So they physically started phishing those boxes, right? Number one, they create a tool to go
It's
into
like
the
a pole with
box
sticky at the end.
with a sticky on the end and pull it out. So the Postal Service fixed that, and all of a sudden you couldn't open up the slot any further than this. Like some people thought it was so people, moms or dads can't throw dirty diapers down there, but that wasn't the case. It was so they couldn't fish the envelopes out.
Mhm.
But then the fraudsters got very physical, and they started robbing the postal carriers because they wanted the key that the postal carrier uses. So, and then they would access using the key. So what the Postal Service did is they had a big initiative and dedicated a lot of resources towards fixing like those boxes and some other compromise points in the Postal Service. Like if you see a new, I think they're green boxes, they look like little tanks without the tracks on them, right? They're supposed to be like theft proof, and they're going away from the keys. Like they're putting their postal carriers at risk with the keys of being robbed. They're going away from keys and using coded entry pads, things like that. So they are trying to harden up, but in your situation, Patty, that could have been the point of compromise, right? Because it sounds like it left the mail room of the insurance company safely, because you always have to worry about insiders too. See, we could talk about different points,
There's
compromises, and risks all day
You did it.
long.
Well, and also let's just point this out. So for people who are mailing things that they don't want to have taken, the blue boxes, especially like, like if the last pickup time is 5:30, the most common time for these to be stolen is overnight. So don't put money envelopes in there, at 6 p.m. when it's not going to get picked up till 8 a.m. the next day. That's when you want to walk it up to the postal office and stick it in, correct? Is that good advice, or is that still risk?
Yeah, no, that's perfect, and they're my basic advice, right? Number one, don't write, monitor online, go electronic, and if you have to mail a check, go to the post office or use FedEx, walk in there and put it in the mail slot that's inside the safe area.
Right.
Then at least you're taking one more step towards protecting that
Right.
check. But then
Well,
remember,
it's kind of like the advice we give about freezing your credit. Yeah, if you're gonna,
it,
buy a
yeah,
car, you have that little bit, that extra 2 minutes or 5 minutes where you have to go into the app and unfreeze your credit, but it saves you, because this type of thing, as Patty can attest, it can ruin your day or your year, and in many cases, for a lot of people, their life. So you really want to be careful. It's worth that extra 2 minutes, and you get a few more steps in while you're at it.
It's amazing.
absolutely.
I mean, and I told you, Jocelyn, I think I told you, Jim, like that same week, somebody intercepted a wire transfer that my husband had done for hundreds of thousands, almost $1 million. And so we've become much more mindful, to the point where my husband sent me a text saying, what's the code to the safe? And I said, how do I know this is you?
That's good. That's good. All right. Now you get the Smarter Online Safety badge today.
I mean, now I get the thing like, hey, you've gone through fast track. I'm like, how do I know that's real? I mean, I've become really paranoid. I probably,
That's
I'm probably wanting, if I get pulled over, I'm probably going to get arrested because I didn't make a payment.
Well, this is good, because it took me 25 years not to trust anybody. You don't trust anybody after 6 months. So this is great. We're heading in the
Well,
right direction.
and let's just say, just to be clear, because 15% of population has pathology and some crime and stuff, just assume, just know, you trust, but be suspect and be on alert, because there's lots of people worth trusting, and just assume that a certain number of emails, a certain number of text messages, a certain number of phone calls, and a certain number of people are fraudsters. And so if you're looking for things that would alert you to who they are, you can still be a trustful person and live
Right.
a good life, but not be, don't, no, you do not want to trust everybody and every situation, because then you're setting yourself up to be a victim.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's really important in today's world, especially especially in California, with all the fires and people getting checks, and,
Yes.
it's chaos. And I'm sure they're sending out tens of thousands of checks. And, it's just a good reminder for people to really pay attention. Normally, I would have taken that check, I would have taken a picture of it and automatically deposited it through an app with my bank. But because it wasn't my bank, it had to go out the other way. And
Right.
it
And it
was
was, dual endorsement, so you had to get it over to another party. So,
Yeah, it was a tough situation you were put in from the beginning. And there are the situations that the criminal element looks for, right? So like look at all that float time they had for this check to clear.
Well, and they count on that. That's what
Yes,
cyber criminals
exactly.
count on too. They count on, every hour you give them is a day of gold for them. So you did that. And Patty, you've learned more than you ever thought you would know about check washing and check counterfeiting and sticky sticks going down in blue boxes and what you can and can't see from other boxes and how to advocate for yourself. And I know Jim's been a huge advocate here. What else would you add? What advice do you have for the listeners so that they can avoid this happening to them?
Me or Jim?
You, Patty.
Oh, I would say again, if you send money to someone, check.
Mhm.
I just didn't know to check. If I had said, hey, you should be getting this check, we would have known within a couple days.
Mhm.
And if it wasn't there, we could have called the insurance company and said, hey, it didn't, what I sent it, if I had sent it overnight, then and they hadn't gotten it, then we would automatically have known and we might have gotten that 24-hour window. And I will also say the next time I go to a bank and they say I have to hold your check for 24 hours, I'm going to say thank you.
Because, the tellers of the world are going to be happy.
Yes.
We're now thanking them instead of yelling at them. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all there for a reason.
that's awesome. That's great advice. And here again, even if you'd send it in the mail, you would still that thing of maybe putting on your calendar, like 5 days out, follow up with so and so. I know for me, if I don't put something on my calendar or my to-do list, it's so easy to forget because we're all so busy. So great tip to just put something. You want to have a tripwire
Yes.
that you're going to come across that's going to remind you to either call and verify or check your bank or do something. And then once you see everything's going well, then you can put it to rest, but keep it active until it's closed. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So, wow. And Patty, you are a CEO and a New York Times bestselling author and a keynote speaker and a coach to successful people everywhere. So you're a little busy and don't have time for this kind of nonsense. And if people want to learn more about what you do and your programs and stuff, how can they best reach you?
Well, they should probably call Jim, not me.
Not for the check washing. We're going to get to Jim in a minute, but just for your programs that I
Uh,
introduced early on.
You can go to pattyaubrey.com and it's PATTYAUBERY.com to find out more about me.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the link below on our YouTube, our newsletter, and videos. And if you're listening on the podcast, you've got that, or you can come to our smarteronlinesafety.com to see that as well. And Jim, wow, you've already given us so much advice, but I want to give you final words.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much again for having me on. And Patty, I hope everything it keeps working out for you, put it that way. But yeah, if somebody wants to get a hold of me and talk fraud, I'm always open to talking fraud with anybody. So the best way to hit me up is probably like on LinkedIn. I've
And if
done
they
this
want to
my
get
whole
more
life.
tips, if they want to get
Yeah,
more tips from the
more
ABA,
tips.
do they
Yeah.
come to should they come to your LinkedIn site to find out more about ABA as well?
Well, we could direct them. I normally direct folks to ABA, but you could also go to aba.com and look for different fraud tips. My contact information's on there. But the key is these two training notes on my right and left shoulder there. The one was practice safe checks that you pointed out. That's open to the public. All you have to do is keyword search practice safe checks. You'll go to a safe site and there's good consumer education on this site that ABA refreshes regularly. And it's a pretty neat interactive website. The same with Banks Never Asked That. Basically, that's an anti-phishing uh, training for the consumer.
And just so I'm clear, it's banksneverasked.com.
Banksneverasked that.com. And that'll give you an option to even query practice safe checks as well if you just want to go into banksneverasked that.com. But the both of them are really just consumer-based interactive training platforms. They put a little humor spin on the training, but there's great tips in there and there's tests at the end. Have your family members, go through this and take those tests. My poor mom, I make her take the Banks Never Asked That
Yes.
test every year. So
And in fact, I would recommend for everybody, because we keep learning about how fraudsters jump in and take over sponsored links on Google of things that are legitimate sites. So go to banksneveraskThat.com to get to practice safe checks, because you never know when somebody might do a pop-up sponsored ad to bring you to a phishing site or a credential site, and that's going to look legitimate, but is not. So we learn a lot of tips on here from all of our experts on smarter online safety, and that was one we learned recently. So that is so great. Jim, thank you so much. Thank you for the service you've done in our government, and thank you for the service you're doing for all of us and all banks now, helping keep us safer as consumers and as businesses. And Patty, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this personal story that we are wanting to turn from victim into victor here. And thank you for sharing that so many people could benefit from it. And for all of you out there, wow, so many tips. Now you know all about check washing and check fraud, and you can research it more, but share this with your friends and family as well, because this is something that until it happens to you, unfortunately, most people don't know about. So take some protective action now. So we're going to be back with another Smarter Online Safety podcast next week. If you like this, please share it with somebody you know. And until next time, stay safe out there.